The faithful fanatic is live. Going back to the 1970s, the rock band America had a song, their biggest hit, A Horse with No Name. You know, it goes something like, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. Fast forward 50 years later. 50 years later, the 49ers just lost to a football team in the desert with no name. With no name. My guess is it's the only loss in franchise history where they literally lost to a team with no name. The 49ers fall short to Washington 15-23. Marco and I are here to break it down, give out game grades, immediate thoughts. This was a loss. This was a win, a game the 49ers absolutely needed to have any hope at making the playoffs. They lost. And at this point, with the team being 5-8, their best bet is to play as many young players as possible, get a good, strong look at them, a thorough look at them over the remaining 3 games, see what you got going in to the 2021 season. But before we dig into what the team should do down the stretch, the last 3 games, the stretch that does not really matter as far as playoff contention goes, they're in no man's land right now. If they win a handful of games, it does them no good, essentially, because the playoffs are out of the question, and it'll just now raise their draft selection, the earliest possibility that they can draft. So let's jump into this game. Let's save Nick Mullins. We'll start with the offense. Let's start with the running backs. Marco, what grade are you giving with the running backs?
The running backs, I'm going to give the running backs a B-. I felt like they ran hard. They should have had the ball a little bit more, but I can't give them anything higher because Jeff Wilson's fumble. I mean, he's had a fumble history in the past coming into the NFL, and he started running the ball pretty damn good, and then out of nowhere he starts fumbling again. So that worries me because I really do like Jeff Wilson Jr. So it's alarming, but I can't give them anything better than a B-.
We don't go over these before our pod, by the way, so I'm just learning Marco's grades right now as we're doing this. I also gave the running backs a B- for the same exact reason that you just touched on. Jeff Wilson Jr. with another costly fumble. He's been careless with the ball over the course of the last couple weeks, not taking care of it. Raheem Mostert looks pretty good. Jeff Wilson Jr., they're both running hard. That's not really the issue. The issue is the lack of ball security. Each of them have had their fair share of fumbles over the last couple weeks, but I believe outside of that, they ran well, took advantage of the holes that were opened up from the offensive line. But I'm with you. B- is a fair grade in my opinion, solely because of the turnovers. They did not have that great of a game. Mostert, when you look, he hasn't had that home run in the last couple weeks. We've been waiting for it now that he's back in the lineup, and it just has not come. So Mostert finishes the game with 14 carries for 65 yards. Jeff Wilson, 11 carries for 31 yards, had that touchdown, had the fumble. B- is a very fair grade. We agree on that as far as running backs go.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, with the running backs, you have to also got to look at, like, is there really running lanes? Is there really time to actually run? Because if you look at it, the 49ers, they wanted to run the ball. The Washington football team, they're a really good defensive line, and they're a really good run defense. They're like top 10 in the run defense category. And so when I was watching them previously to the game, I thought that they weren't going to be able to run the ball as well as they needed to. And I was talking to a few people, and I said, in order for them to win, Nick Mullins is going to have to win this game for them. And I just didn't see it happening. And it's really alarming because it's one of those games where you should be able to run it down their throat, take care of the ball, and win.
So the 49ers finished averaging 3.84 yards per carry between Mostert and Wilson. Let's jump into the wide receivers. I'll kick us off here. Brandon Ayuk's phenomenal. He is so good. But as a collective group, I'm also giving them a B-. Brandon Ayuk solely deserves an A-. He had one drop. But outside of that, let's just talk about Brandon Ayuk. 10 catches for 119 yards. Over the course of the last 5 games, Brandon Ayuk has averaged 7 catches, at least 7 catches per game, and at least 99 receiving yards. Or that's what he's averaging. He's averaging 7 receptions per game over the last 5 and 99 receiving yards. If you apply that over a 16-game season, what he's averaged for the last 5 games he's played in, you get 115 catches for nearly 1,600 receiving yards. The acrobatic catches he makes are just mind-blowing. He is the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver. Then you have Kendrick Bourne, who really showed the inconsistent side of him with a lot of drops, made a couple tough catches. It was a classic Kendrick Bourne game where he makes difficult catches and he has a few drops. Go ahead.
But on KB, at the same time, like, they're drops, but they're not were like 100% catchable ball. So it has to be, for me, when people say drop, if it's you in the hand, people say it's a drop. But at the same time, like, when you're having to, like, outstretch entirely, like, yes, KB is known for making those kind of catches, but it's one of those things where they just need to be better balls. So KB, I love him. You and I were talking about it earlier. We were texting about it. He's one of those guys where I want to keep around because he's a good number 3, but I don't think he's going to stick around. He's having a good season, has 500 yards already. I think he ends up leaving the 49ers.
The one drop I'm referring to, there was a handful where he had his hands on the ball, but they were not good balls thrown by Nick Mullins. Specifically, there was one, I forget exactly where it was. The drop I'm talking about was in the first quarter on a slant route. He just straight up dropped it, cutting across the middle of the field. And then he had a false start penalty, which turned a 3rd and 9 into a 3rd and 14, set the team back. So Bourne did not have his best game. Richie James Jr. did some stuff. He had 2 big 3rd down catches. There was that one play with Mullins rolling out to his right. He found James, who was right around the first down marker. It was on a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5. And then he had a 3rd and 11 or 3rd and 12 on what I want to say was the 49ers scoring drive. I could be wrong on that. But Richie James had a few big moments as a receiver in this game. I think that a B- is fair collectively as a unit. I want to talk about Devo Samuel a little bit before you jump into your grades. Yep. So I've been inspired to look deep into the injury history of Devo Samuel. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think this is what 49er fans are going to have to live with over the course of Devo Samuel's career. He's a player that's injury prone. I don't know if that's too harsh to say, but let's go back to his freshman year at South Carolina. Freshman year, missed 7 games, hamstring injury. Sophomore year, missed 3 games, hamstring injury. Junior year, broke bone in leg, missed 10 games. He broke his fibula. NFL, year 2, broken foot, ongoing hamstring problems. He has missed a lot of football games over the course of his collegiate and professional career, over 30. He's only played in about 64% of games between college and pros. I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon. I don't know if it's bad luck. It's not necessarily an indicator that he's always going to miss games each and every season, but it's not very reassuring knowing that his injury history is that rich.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Nick. That was a red flag of his coming out of college. But again, I think the hamstring injury and the injuries that he's had at the pro level is due to, so the broken foot, like, that's just a freak play. Like, you can't prevent that. But the hamstring injury, it's because he was never in football shape, and they kind of needed him, and they kind of threw him in the fire. He came back week 2, wasn't it week 2 or week 3 against the Rams? So it's kind of like he didn't really get into football shape. So then that lingers. When you're not in football shape, you're playing yourself into shape, and it just tears on your body. The fact that he's used as a running back and not a receiver also plays a factor. But I do think there's a big question mark. Is Devo Samuel going to be healthy each year, or is he going to be the Devo Samuel we know, missing games every so often? Because that's what his track history shows, and that's worrisome.
Yeah, it's definitely worrisome. But go ahead, give your grade on the receivers front.
So I was going to give him a C+. I originally had him at B-. But like you said, Ayuk is what puts them at the B- level. Way too many drop balls, way too many penalties. There's inconsistent play. At some point, like, as much as I want to criticize Nick Mullins, and I will do so because I think he played terribly, But at some point, as a receiver, you must help your damn quarterback out. I don't care what it is. Catch the damn ball. And that goes from Jeff Wilson, who had a drop, KB had a drop, Brandon Ayuk had a drop. So those people need to step up. At some point, you can't just let the ball hit you in the damn hands and just want to turn upfield. I think the biggest problem with the 49ers receiving corps is the fact that Devo Samuel got hurt, and right away you see the 49ers game plan change. Like, you could tell they wanted to use the outside end around right away. And I think they were going to stick to that going into the game. And then he goes down and the whole kind of offense changes. And then from there, like, Nick Mullins' eyes kind of was like, oh, I'm going to have to rely on my receivers today. And I don't think he really trusts his receivers, to be honest with you.
Except for Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk, I can talk about him all day long. Where that one catch he had where there was the pass interference called right as he was catching the ball. The contact was made before he actually caught the ball. But his hand-eye coordination is great. Let's jump in tight ends. So I know I did this as well because you did it a couple weeks ago with Kyle Juszczyk, tight end, fullback. We're throwing him in that tight end category because he lines up as a tight end occasionally. Go ahead and give your grade with tight ends.
Tight ends, I give, because he's in that group, I give him a C. He got blown up. That's inexcusable for you're the highest paid fullback in the NFL. You should be a good pass blocker. That was inexcusable. The tight ends really weren't there the entire game. Jordan Reid had a few nice plays, I believe. But at the entire thing, Charlie Warner, I believe he missed a block when I was watching the game. So for me, it's just we're missing George Kittle. The run game isn't there, and it sucks because George Kittle steals the edge. George Kittle is what gets that team energized. And they don't really have anybody on that offense besides KB. But when you're playing as shitty as KB played, you can't be energetic like that. So that offense was just waiting for someone to give them a spark. They didn't get that from anyone. So that tight end room is missing George Kittle. And I think they're trying to use Kyle Juszczyk in a way, like normally he doesn't block like that. Normally he leaks out and goes into the flat. And it showed because that dude got lit up. Like I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Yep. My tight end grade, I'll give them a C+. Ross Dwelley, when the ball's thrown his way, he's been making plays. So he went 2 catches for 20 yards. Jordan Reid, I'm getting a little irritated by Jordan Reid. He has the worst body language on the field. Every time the ball's overthrown, and granted, I get his frustration. It's happening frequently with Nick Mullins, but he's always frailing his arms up in the air, screaming inside his helmet. He doesn't look like a guy that wants to return to the 49ers next season unless he's offered a good amount of money, because he's shown this year, that he's still a good NFL receiving tight end, and he'll probably get a solid contract elsewhere. I don't see him coming back next year. I wouldn't mind him coming back, but Ross Dwelley is going to be cheaper. Charlie Warner, when he's caught 2 passes, which both came against the Bills. I don't think he caught a pass yesterday against the Cardinals. Against the Washington football team, excuse me. So, yeah, Jordan Reid, his days as a Niner are outnumbered. In my opinion, Kyle Juszczyk got blown up. That kind of spiraled the pass rush coming at Nick Mullins. So I'm giving the tight ends a C+. The offensive line.
Even Ross Dwelley, didn't Ross Dwelley have a holding call, or was it a
he's been getting penalized. He's been getting penalized a lot lately.
Yeah, so that bothers me because you're a veteran now. You're no longer Ross Dwelley, the undrafted free agent. You're in your, 4th year, 3rd year. You can't have those mistakes at the NFL level. Those are what make you end up not being in the NFL. So he better get his act together.
Yeah, and it seems like there's this pattern where every time he makes a play, the next thing he does is have a penalty. It's a pattern with Ross Dwelley. Offensive line. So I just went back and rewatched the game. The offensive line really was not that bad. They weren't that bad at all. Nick Mullins was holding on to the ball an extremely long time on the majority of those sacks. Trent Williams, I felt like, should have had a pressure allowed under his belt right after the Kyle Juszczyk sack that he gave up. And then on that final drive, Mike McGlinchey played fairly okay. I went back and specifically watched him. But it's the final drives when the games matter the most, or the most critical moment of each game is when he really struggles. And he specifically is already under a magnifying glass. He already is. And it doesn't help that these lapses he has in pass protection happen in such critical moments. You can go back to the CJ Beathard underdog story against the Eagles where he's leading the comeback Sunday Night Football. On that final drive, McGlinchey was getting blown up over and over and over and over and over again. And what happens? The final drive, excluding the final drive where the last play went to Brandon Ayuk on what was supposed to be a lateral play, the drive prior to that, there was a screen called for Brandon Ayuk. McGlinchey misses his block on the screen. Couple plays later, gets called for holding on the 3rd down and 2 on the pass to Kendrick Bourne. And on the 4th and 12, because it was a 10-yard penalty on this holding play, he gets pressured again, and Mullins doesn't have enough time. Kendrick Bourne doesn't have enough time to run to the sticks. The ball has to come out early because Mullins is under pressure because of McGlinchey. So, of course, everybody's paying attention on that final drive. Are the Niners going to come back? Are they going to win this game? And McGlinchey does that, and it was very reminiscent of what happened against the Eagles. Outside of that, he was not as bad, but in my opinion, he's still having a horrific season, and that's something you and I discussed earlier on. The offensive line, they get a B- from me. They really weren't that bad, and they weren't good either. Real good, at least.
I give him a B. I was watching Mike majority of the game. He had a really solid game. Everyone did like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. I watched it. I was kind of being straight on him because for me, it's Mike's 5th year is going to get picked up. His 5th year option is going to get picked up. And I know it is because who do you put at right tackle? You don't put a rookie at right tackle because there's other needs on this 49ers roster. There's no one in free agency who hits the market who will be a better player because he is an elite run blocker. He's not there as a pass blocker. But at the end of the day, that offensive line got no help from Nick Mullins. No help at all. So the run game is lacking. But again, it's lacking because of the quarterback behind the center. When no defenses fear you, then they're gonna sit on everything. They're gonna stack the box. It comes to what comes to my mind is when Jason Verrett, he said, yeah, we're gonna sit on everything on Alex Smith. We're gonna force him to throw the ball. We know he's a dink and duck quarterback. Same thing for Nick Mullins. They know that they know Nick Mullins, Jimmy Garoppolo, and CJ Beathard aren't gonna launch the ball on them. So they just stack the box and hey, you beat me. I dare you to beat me. And when the defensive line gets to tee off on offensive line like that, the offensive line is going to look worse than it really is.
Not only that, I do believe you have to take into consideration the talent on Washington's defensive line. It's a real good unit. It's a real good unit. And Mullins had time on a lot of his dropbacks. He really did. In the sacks that he took, not every single one of them, but a handful of them were his fault for not getting rid of the ball. Let's talk Mullins. You go ahead, or you want me to go first?
It's up to you, Nick. He's both gonna get a bad grade from both of us.
Yeah, he is, but I'm gonna flip the script a little bit. I'm not gonna give him an F. He's gonna get a D-. A D- because he's a backup. And yes, I will evaluate him as a backup, but he did enough to not get an F from me. A couple things I'll talk about. In the first quarter, he was okay. Better than okay. 5 of 7 in the first quarter. The second quarter, he was looking real bad. And the drive where he threw the interception, where he was targeting Kyle Juszczyk, before that interception, before that play, it looked like he was starting to get some momentum. He had a completion to Kendrick Bourne, a real nice pass. Had another completion to Brandon Ayuk where he plucked the ball off the ground. If it was challenged, it would have been an incomplete pass. And then he made a real nice play outside the pocket to Richie James on the run for a first down. Gets the ball to Jeff Wilson for a first down on that drive. Escaped the sack, flipped the ball out to Raheem Mostert. And then the very next play, after it looks like the 49ers are marching down the field, getting ready to score, he throws the pick six. And even on that pick six, one, a colleague of mine, Jack Hammer, broke this play down. He had his eyes on Jeff Wilson, who was there for a first down, took his eyes off of him, pulled it back, threw it to Kyle Juszczyk, and Juszczyk started to go up the field as the ball was thrown to him. I don't know why that happened. At the end of the day, it was not the right decision from Nick Mullins. And after that pick six, he bounced back really nicely, led a scoring drive. So he didn't completely flunk the game, but he really costed the 49ers. He pretty much solely lost the game. But again, he's a backup. If a starting quarterback solely lost this game, F. Nick Mullins backup, D-.
I disagree. I give him an F. I mean, that interception, that pick six, that was on him, 100%. I've seen people say that it was on Kyle Juszczyk, that if they were on the same page, if he keeps it flat, no, you can't make that throw coming here. You know he's in the flat. They're reading everything on you. They're sitting on every damn route, and then you throw it. That's terrible. 1, 2. He thought he was damn Michael Vick holding the ball. 1, and this bothers me as a quarterback. It bothers me. If I see you holding the ball like that, I'm going to force you to fumble if we're playing, and that's a fact. And holding the ball like that loosely, he's known for being turnover prone, fumble there. One of my biggest thing when I knew it was going to be a bad game was when Chase Young got the sack on him. Chase Young drops. He dropped into coverage. He's in a flat. There's no one coming into his flat. No one's daring him anything. So at that point, if the quarterback's staying there, he could call his number and he could blitz. That one wasn't on Justin School. He likes to do this a lot. Like I don't know who he thinks he is. You got to get rid of it. You don't got a cannon of an arm to do this and then gun it. You got to just get rid of it. So he's really bad. Like his overthrows on Brandon Ayuk. He overthrew KB. He overthrew Jeff Wilson Jr. Like at the end of the day, I understand he's a backup, but when you're a backup who already has 15 career starts, that's unacceptable. Unacceptable. Yeah, and this is why, for me, I hold Nick Mullins to a standard because I've seen a lot of people in the 49er fan base say Nick Mullins was better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Nick Mullins should be the starter. So that's why I hold him to a high standard. Because if they want to hold, and it's not right to Jimmy Garoppolo because a terrible quarterback versus an average quarterback, there's a huge gap there. So I hold Jimmy Garoppolo to an even higher standard than I do Mullins. So I give him a bad grade. Bad grade. F. Failed.
Yeah.
F minus if I could have.
I spent a lot of time talking about what Nick Mullins did well, and that's really going the extra mile to try to justify my grade of giving him a D- opposed to an F, but he was awful. He was absolutely awful. The way he was holding out the ball so carelessly, like he actually thought he was going to be able to make a play and outrun the Washington football team defensive line. He had a lot of bad throws. There was one specific throw, and even if he made the throw, it wouldn't have counted anyway because there was an illegal formation called on the 49ers, but he was targeting Brandon Ayuk, who was wide open, had a pocket so clean and just completely overshot him. He was very inaccurate all day long. But again, I'll cut him just a tiny little sliver of slack because he did bounce back from that pick six well when he really could have just went into a shell. So I give Nick Mullins a D-.
What also bothered me with Nick Mullins is the fact that they had drops from KB, KB's false start. At some point, you have to get into the huddle and say, get our shit together and figure it out. You already command the huddle each and every week for the last, 6-7 weeks. You need to understand that you're the leader of this offense. This offense goes as far as you go. Yeah, it might not go that far because you have your limitations. So you have to figure out how to lead your troops, and he did not do that at all on Sunday. They started off really slow, like they looked sluggish on offense. It was really bad from the entire offense, and that also goes to Kyle Shanahan.
Let's talk about Kyle Shanahan. What grade do you give Kyle?
I give them a C. I give him a C. I mean, you can't do much when you have a quarterback like this. He put up 15 points with them. But what bothers me with Kyle Shanahan is as soon as he lost Devo Samuel, continue to run that end around. Use Richie James. Use Brandon Ayuk on that end around. That got you 9 yards right away. Like, You know that Nick Mullins is struggling. You see it. You're throwing your hands in the damn air because Nick Mullins is overthrowing people because people are dropping passes. Why not utilize your athletes in Brandon Ayuk and Richie James? You could even use Jeff Wilson on those end arounds in a type of way. Line them up in the slot. Set them in motion. Those guys are fast running backs. They're athletic. So for me, Kyle Shanahan could have been much better because obviously he's seen Nick Mullins was struggling. Now, what questions me is he was playing terribly going into the first half. He decides to roll with Nick Mullins. And that's what bothered me. You drafted CJ Beathard in the 3rd round. He has way more tools than Nick Mullins does. He has a better arm. He's a bigger guy. He's a little bit more mobile than Nick Mullins is. Why not throw the guy you drafted out? He's not going to be any worse than Nick Mullins. And I think after his press conference today, when I listened to it, CJ Beathard is going to start Sunday.
My grade for Kyle Shanahan, I give him a B, a solid B. I don't think there's too much you can throw at him. A lot of this was out of his control. He lost his wide receiver on the first play of the game. He made a clear effort to get his playmakers the ball early, giving the ball to Devo Samuel on the very first play, getting Brandon Ayuk heavily involved on design plays on that opening drive. Raheem Mostert getting touches, Jeff Wilson Jr. getting touches. A lot of this is outside of Kyle Shanahan's control, and the 49ers just couldn't execute. Washington's defense is good. It's a good defense.
They're good. They're really good.
But I agree. I was a little more lenient when I thought Beathard should have entered the game. I wasn't heavily advocating for it to start the second half. Of course, it would have made total sense. After that pick 6, I thought to myself, there's no way you're going to put Mullins back in this game, right? And then sure enough, Mullins comes back in, and it actually paid dividends because he leads a scoring drive. That 16-point deficit turns into an 8-point deficit. So Shanahan gets a B. He's doing all he can with a backup. Of course, there's always place to question you in hindsight. Of course, the end arounds were working well. I've been advocating for Richie James to be used on those bubble screens and end arounds when Devo Samuel was out. So Shanahan gets a B for me. Let's talk about this quarterback controversy, Nick Mullins or CJ Beathard next week. This is my solution. My solution to this is play them both. Play them both. It doesn't matter who starts. Start Mullins, start Beathard. Give them 2 series each or a series each. Alternate. And then go with whichever hand is less cold in the second half. Whichever quarterback you feel like gives you the best chance to win or keep you competitive, go ahead and do that. Because at this point, it doesn't freaking matter if you're starting CJ Beathard or Nick Mullins. They're both not good. Mullins is a better backup based on what I've seen over the last 3 years. And Josh Johnson, I don't see the logic in signing him. I want to talk about Anthony Gordon. Anthony Gordon went to Terra Nova High School, the high school I attended. We went to school together.
Interviewed him, by the way.
I interviewed him. He's a friend of mine. I coach his brother on my basketball team at Terra Nova. Was at Washington State last year. Second to Joe Burrow in pretty much every single passing category. The 49ers brought him in for a visit. For whatever reason, he didn't end up getting signed. But that's a guy who I would be extremely intrigued by to bring him in because of the unknown. Maybe we've seen undrafted quarterbacks pan out in the NFL. Nick Mullins is an undrafted quarterback. All he needs is a shot.
And we hardly see undrafted quarterbacks pan out, Nick.
We've seen them. We've seen Tony Romo pan out. There's a handful of guys that have gone on to have solid NFL careers as backups, as undrafted guys. It's not completely uncommon.
As a backup, I could see him as a backup, but not anything more than a backup.
Well, where I'm going with this is we've seen enough of CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins to know what they are. We know what they are. We know what their ceilings are. We know what their floors are. And none of it's pretty. None of it's enticing. None of it. No one's going to be excited when Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard get extended or receive new contracts if that happens with the 49ers. Their time is done. Their time is done. If you bring in a fresh face, I can't talk right now, a fresh face like an Anthony Gordon, who was amazing at Washington State, was MVP, co-MVP of the Senior Bowl. This guy was co-MVP of the Senior Bowl. And you don't know what you're getting. And there's more to that than knowing the product you're getting on the field between CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins is terrible. So go with the unknown. And of course, now with 3 games left and with the COVID protocols, that likely won't happen. But I'm all for bringing in a fresh face and a local story, a local quarterback coming in is an exciting storyline. In the unknown, again, the potential that's there is worth it, in my opinion, knowing that CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins are not good.
See, for me, I think the reason why you have to start CJ Beathard is moving forward, this whole quarterback room might get blown up. And I think CJ Beathard is going to be the backup quarterback next year. Some reason I don't think Nick Mullins is that good. I think CJ Beathard is a much stronger arm. Everyone likes to point out about like CJ having all these stats and all these yards and all this stuff. But all of his stuff comes in garbage time. He gets a lot of garbage time yards. So that's why his yards are every single Sunday they compare his stats to the most stats in the last 14 games by a starting quarterback. But no, all his stats come in garbage time. The game that comes to mind for CJ Beathard, it's one of those games where I didn't think he was going to be able to keep up with the Green Bay Packers. But in 2018, when he was 16 for 23, 250 yards, I believe. He had 2 touchdowns and an interception, competing with Aaron Rodgers. He looked lights out that game. He looked really good. And then since then, and that was one of his few starts in 2018. And then after that, he didn't really regress. The next game, he had another 250 yards, or no, 170. The game before, he had 350, and then 250, and then 170, 190. And then after that, they really didn't give him a shot. For Nick Mullins, I don't understand the Nick Mullins, why he's starting over him. He doesn't have a strong arm. CJ Beathard at least could push the ball downfield every once in a while. I think Kyle Shanahan finally says, F it, CJ's my guy for the rest of the season. See what I have with him, because obviously I didn't give him the right chance I should have.
I'm going to go back and correct myself. Anthony, the Senior Bowl MVP was Justin Herbert. Anthony Gordon had the better stat line in Mobile, Alabama, going 8 of 12 for 69 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I want to make sure I have all my facts right here.
And he had an insane touchdown. He had an insane touchdown. He was falling away to the right. He was rolling right, falling away, and he slung it in there on an awkward platform. I remember that touchdown. He has an awkward where he could throw from an awkward platform, which is a really good tool to have in the NFL.
Of course, and he was also drafted out of high school to play for the New York Mets. So he has some of those pitching releases, if you will. But you're right about CJ Beathard. CJ Beathard has the stronger arm, can push the ball downfield. But again, I got to go back to 2018 when Garoppolo was out, and CJ Beathard was nowhere near the level that which Nick Mullins performed at. So I can't help but go back to 2018 when both those guys had equal opportunities and Mullins took advantage of it.
I'm gonna look at Nick Mullins' stats real quick in 2018, the games he started. I'm gonna just compare them real quick, because it's one of those ones where I feel like I really do think he played not as well as CJ Beathard. So 2018. How do I do this? But I get what you're saying and why we should roll with Anthony Gordon and bring him in. But his workout, I kind of feel bad for his workout. His workout was one of those things where it sounded like they invited him to throw to receivers, if that makes sense. Like, hey, we want the receivers. We need you to come throw, kind of thing, but showcase your arm to us. So for CJ Beathard, he had 6 games versus Mullins 8 games. So there's going to be Mullins should have a little bit more stats to go off of. But for Nick Mullins, he had 2,277 yards. So that's legit for 8 starts. 13 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 64% completion rating. CJ Beathard had 1,200 yards, 1,252, 8 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in 2 games less. So yes, his stats aren't there, But the game, there hasn't been a game where Nick Mullins has played where he has looked as good as CJ Beathard against CJ Beathard when he played against the Arizona Cardinals and the Green Bay Packers. Those two games from CJ Beathard have been better than any game that Nick Mullins has ever played in his career.
Fair.
So that for me, it's one of those ones where like he's shown he has higher upside.
Let's go the defensive side of the ball, starting with the defensive line. And by the way, let's open up with by this. The defense. What a phenomenal performance by the 49ers defense. They gave up 12 first downs. 12 first downs to the Washington football team. How a defense can allow only 12 first downs in a game and your team still loses is mind-boggling. It's because Nick Mullins gave up 14 points to the Washington football team defense. If you include Jeff Wilson Jr.'s fumble where they got the ball inside the red zone right around there, that's 17 points. The defense really allowed 6 points. 6 points. The defense was great in this game. 110, 115 yards passing between Alex Smith and Dwayne Haskins is a very good number. I tip my cap to Robert Saleh and the 49ers defense. They played a great football game.
Nick, are you trying to piss me off right now? Because this really ticks me off that the freaking 49ers defense. It's funny because how do you give up 9 points and find a way to lose a game? Like, that's just – it doesn't happen in the NFL. When your defense pitches a shutout, literally a shutout game where they look lights out all game, they got turnovers, and you put it this way. The offense scored 1 point. They gave 14 points to the freaking Washington football team. That's embarrassing. They netted 1 point on offense and left the defense stranded by, hey, you guys should probably score 15 points so we can win. Like, is that what they're wanting them to do? Guys, you have to figure something out. The defense can't win games. They can't score touchdowns for you every week, Nick Mullins. Come on. I know they did it against the Rams. They can't do it every week for you, buddy.
Yeah, the poor defense, poor Robert Saleh. They fought real hard to do everything in their power to win that game, and they just would not break. They would not break no matter how poor the field position got that they had to start with. With their backs against the wall, they came through and got stop after stop against the football team offense. Defensive line, what's your defensive line grade?
D-line, I give D-line a B. I will give them a B+. I mean, they were good in the run game. They only gave up 100 yards. They didn't really get to the quarterback like I thought they would. But for me, the main thing that I'm watching from that D-line is how is Javon Kinlaw getting better? How is the young guys getting better? How is Deion Jordan looking? How is Jordan Willis looking? Because those are guys that in a lost season, you need to see guys do stuff like that. Kerry Hyder looked good like he normally does. But I'm looking for an opposite on an edge, opposite of Nick Bosa. And it's funny because I've been last pod we talked about Deion Jordan, how he looked good the last 5 games or so. He's getting pressure, he's just not getting home. And now when they need a spark, 2 games in a row, they need a spark. Who shows up? Who knocks on the door? Deion Jordan, who I think should be getting more reps than anyone else on the outside when it comes to passing downs. He is winning consistently on passing downs and getting pressure. He's not getting the recognition because he doesn't have the sack total that Kerry Hyder does. But that D-line put together a good game where when you're not giving up, they're trying to run the ball down your throat and you're not giving up yards. Kudos to the defensive line.
I'm giving the defensive line a B-. It was a relatively quiet day for the defensive line. Kinlaw had a nice tackle for loss. The first sack is a play that Alex Smith tripped when they had the ball, 3rd and goal, threatening to score, and Jordan Willis got credit for the sack. Eric Armstead had a run stop. It was almost a tackle for a loss, then he missed the tackle. Deion Jordan has had a solid string of games over the last several weeks, but I'm going to point to something very specific as to why it may seem like I'm giving them a harsh grade. To start the second half, the beginning of the third quarter, McKissick and Peyton Barber were ripping off runs, chunked yardage after chunked yardage. And again, the defense only gave up a field goal on that drive, but the run defense, they gave up 4.5 yards per carry. It's not the worst, not the best, but the quietness and the lack of impact coming from the defensive line is a cause of concern for me, specifically with Eric Armstead. So I'm giving them a B-.
Yeah, and it's not a bad grade because you're not like making it sound like, oh, they played shitty, like, you know what I mean? So like you said they did what they had to do, but this is why they got rid. They did get ripped for a few plays.
It's a fair grade. It's a fair grade.
It's a fair grade.
Let's go linebackers. I'll kick us off. Dre Greenlaw looks like he's not the best linebacker on the field, but he looked like the best linebacker on the field against the Washington football team yesterday. He is flying over the field, all over the field, had a great third down stop to keep the 49ers season alive on a 3rd and 6, 3rd and 5. He made a tackle right before the chains to give the 49ers a glimmer of hope. So Greenlaw is a standout. Fred Warner got hurt, wishing him well. He has a nice streak, by the way, talking about Fred Warner. Next week is in jeopardy for him. So he played every single game for the first 2 years of his career. That's 35 games in a row, including the postseason run last year. We're 13 games into the season this year. So he's played 48 consecutive games. 48 consecutive games. That's a solid streak from Fred Warner. So for that reason, I imagine him trying to play next week to keep that great streak alive. Linebackers played well. I'm going to give them a B, lack of impact, and the only receiving threat that hurt the 49ers in this game was their tight end. So I'm going to give the linebackers a B.
Yeah, I give the linebackers a B. Logan Thomas did do well. I give him props. A former quarterback who transitioned to tight end. But the thing is, once Fred Warner went down, Dre Greenlaw elevated his game. Like he knew, hey, I got to represent for my dog. Like he just went down. And when you have both of those two on the field, you have one of the best linebacking tandems in the NFL. And Dre Greenlaw, that was it 4th and 1? He made it a 4th and 1. It was a 3rd and 9 or something like that. He made it a 4th and 1. That play, that was beautiful. Like you cannot execute that play any better. He had to get through traffic. He had to navigate through traffic. That's what, for me, one of the things I used to do, because I play linebackers, I would cheat. I would cheat all the time. I knew where the play was going. I would cheat over because now you don't have to navigate through all that traffic. And these linebackers, they're so disciplined and they don't cheat. And it's beautiful to see them navigate through traffic like that. But for the Fred Warner part, I hope he doesn't play. It's a neck injury, head injury. Health is wealth on this team. If you're not healthy, don't play. Why risk it going into the rest of the season? I mean, I'd rather have you 100% healthy going into next season rather than you think it's just a singer. Next thing you know, your collarbone breaks or you have neck spasms and shit. Like, I don't want that from Fred Warner. He's an elite linebacker, the best linebacker in the NFL. Bro, stay out until you're ready. If you're ready this week, suit up. Let's go.
Grade?
Oh, I get the linebackers a B. B.
Well, we have a lot.
I give them for the only reason I would have gave them I would give them a B plus, but Logan Thomas did get some work in. But once you lose Fred Warner and your linebackers still stay at a good level, you got to give your depth some props.
Defensive backs.
I give them an A. They played really good. For me, the reason why I give them an A is they generated a turnover. Jimmy Ward, I feel really bad for you, bro. I feel really bad for you. You should have had an interception. As soon as he had that interception, the entire Twitter timeline blew up. Extremely, they blew up. They were like, "Oh my gosh, Jimmy Ward with an interception!" And I'm like, I had seen the replay, and I was like, "Oh, they're gonna be pissed off." But I give them an A. Jason Verrett played really good. Sherm, they were trying to pick on Sherm. Terry McLaurin, he was being targeted. I think he got injured, because he was putting some routes on Richard Sherman. And if he would have stayed healthy throughout the entire game, I think they would have had more targets on Sherman. Sherman did get beat deep. I believe it wasn't Terry McLaurin. It might have been Sims or
Yeah.
Wright. Was it Sims when he got beat deep?
I forget which receiver it was, but I know what player you're talking about. Yeah.
So he gets beat deep. Tarvarius Moore looked better than he did the previous week. So that's a big plus. So I give them an A. They generated a turnover, and they only gave up, was it 195 passing yards?
Yep. No,
So
108.
108, but with the sacks, it goes to 95. And I do give.
I thought you said 195. That's my bad.
No. The 95. What I do when I watch film and when I go to the stats, and I give the D line and the secondary those negative yards, because when you get a sack, that goes on your D line and your secondary. That means they're both in a sync. You're locking up and you're getting to the quarterback. You deserve that props to get this quarterback. The quarterback stats lower.
I'm with you. I'm going to give the secondary an A. You touched on pretty much everything. Terry McLaurin had 2 catches for 24 yards. They did a tremendous job limiting both Dwayne Haskins and Alex Smith. Alex Smith looked real bad. He looked real bad in this game, going 8 of 19 for 57 yards. He was playing.
I give Alex Smith. I just want to throw this out there because he did play terrible. But I do. Jesus.
Bless you, man.
But thank you. But I give him props because he was coming into the game with his sore on the leg he had surgery on and almost got amputated. It was sore. He wanted to play against the 49ers. That was on his shoulders.
I feel you.
I want to play. So I give him props for doing that. I really love Alex Smith. I met him in person. A great dude.
Yeah, Alex Smith is a man that has tremendous respect among the entire NFL population, whether you're a player, a fan, media, whatever the case may be. Alex Smith is a tremendous human being, and his comeback story. I saw someone tweet, and I forget who tweeted it out. If I remember, I'll be sure to give them credit, that they are going to start a petition or start advocating that the Comeback Player of the Year award should be named the Alex Smith Award. And I am 100% on board with that after what he had to go through with his leg nearly having to be amputated. But to go back to the 49ers secondary, Dwayne Haskins threw for 7 completions off 12 attempts, 51 yards. The secondary was great. Verrett interception. Akello Witherspoon had a nice 3rd down stop, and I don't know if he saw the field again after that. Poor Akello. But he got on the field, and he made a nice tackle. I got to give guys like Akello a shout-out whenever I can because he's in the Shanahan doghouse. Robert Saleh gets an A from me. He is just lining up phenomenal performance after phenomenal performance, with the exception of the Bills. That was real bad. So if you go back the last 4 or 5 games and take a look, removing that Bills game, he's been real good. There was a lot of frustrations there against the Bills and his inability to adapt to Josh Allen's mobility. So, but he bounced back this week with a great game plan, and his defense did a phenomenal job.
See, last week, he played an elite quarterback. He played one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. So that's what happens when you play an elite quarterback. You don't have a pass rush, and your secondary consists of older veterans who are known for their injuries as of late rather than their play. So that's what happens with all that mixed up. But I could have gave Robert Saleh an A+, but I'm going to give him an A. You only give 9 points. But again, this was a Washington football team that isn't too good, so I was expecting a lesser game. I thought it was going to be a really low-scoring game, and I thought the 49ers were going to lose in a slow-scoring fashion. But the way that Robert Saleh went about his business, so the reason why I gave him an A and I didn't give him an A-, I almost gave him an A+, but is because of how he reacted when Akello Witherspoon made that tackle. You don't see defensive coordinators bench a player who is inactive for a few weeks, and then he makes a big play for them on 3rd down to get them off the field, and he erupts, and that whole defense and that whole team generated energy around him after a player who he has previously benched. So like that stuff like that to me shows like, okay, this dude is gonna be a good leader of men, and he's gonna translate to be a good head coach. Because when you do stuff like that, you're being genuine with dudes. Like you're being honest. Like you're not
Yep.
sugarcoating anything. You're being yourself. And I think that's what Robert Saleh did. Like he told him, like, hey, look, you're gonna get your chance, make your opportunities count. And Robert Saleh had put together a good game plan and forced them to. He knows Alex Smith is a dink and dunk quarterback, just like Jason Verrett said. And I guarantee you, he was preaching that in their meetings. Force him to beat us deep. And they couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm 100% with you with your assessment of Robert Saleh. He looks like someone, or just reading his players, they genuinely enjoy playing for him. And his energy on the sideline is contagious. I love seeing him flexing and screaming, jumping up and down whenever his guys make a play. And that definitely is him being who he is. Let's jump into some special teams. And before we'll jump into the next segment as far as how the 49ers should approach the remaining 3 games. Special teams grades, I'll just slap one grade on them as a whole and kind of go through everything. I'll give them a B. Mitch Wishnowsky was very good in this game. Mitch Wishnowsky gets an A from me. An A from me. That special teams play where they downed the Washington football team at the 1-yard line was great. Robbie Gould was solid. The reason why I'm giving them a B, they had a lapse on a punt return coverage. And I want to talk to whoever is in Richie James and Brandon Ayuk's ear about when to call for a fair catch. 2 separate times, there was so much green grass. One time for James, one time for Ayuk, and they signaled for a fair catch. Like, as a punt returner, you would imagine that they're chomping at the bit to be able to have an electrifying return. And 2 separate occasions, they called for a fair catch with one defender within 10 yards around them. That's it. Like, you can make that guy miss. Go to the races. Take him one-on-one, juke him out of his shoes, and go. And it was just very frustrating to see Richie James and Brandon Ayuk both call a fair catch with so much green grass around them.
Yeah, I agree with you on the A for Wishnowsky. That's the best game I've ever seen him play. He down 4 punts inside the 20. I don't see him normally do that. He normally puts it in the back of the end zone. So that was really good sign to see. Everyone gave shout out to Tabor Pepper. But I don't want to give Tabor Pepper the credit. That play doesn't happen without the 49ers. They had elevated cornerback Brian Body Calhoun, and he made that play happen. He made it all happen. So I give him the props. I also give Tabor Pepper the props just because he was there and downed it. With Robbie Gould made his extra point. Tabor had a good down at the 1. The special teams unit is not the problem. They've been playing really good.
Yep.
I'm finally glad to see Wishnowsky bombing some punts. I mean, he had I believe his long was like a 58-yarder, almost a 60-yard punt. It was a beauty. He looks really good. Like he's getting comfortable, and I hope this translates next year because it only helps your defense out when you're bombing punts like that, downing it at the 1, downing it inside the 20. It helps your defense a lot.
To touch on how well the special teams unit has played, the special teams unit almost solely cost the 49ers the possibility of beating the Saints. They really were that bad in that game. And from that point forward, they've been tremendous. After the bye, they have been a very solid unit. So 3 games left. You got Dallas, you got the Cardinals, you got the Seahawks. The 49ers are 3 games under 500. The best record they could finish with is 8-8. 8-8, you're mathematically alive for the playoffs still, but you need to have a bunch of tiebreakers go your way. It's little to no chance that the 49ers get into the playoffs. How do they approach these final 3 games, or what do you advocate they should do over the course of the last 3 games?
So over the course of the last 3 games, you're not going to have Devo Samuel. You won't have Jimmy Garoppolo, and you won't have George Kittle. So the expectations going forward isn't high for me. It really isn't. I mean, when you just watch the Washington football team, Dallas Cowboys, I believe they are a better offense than the Washington football team is. Their defense isn't as good, so we could put up points on them. Seattle was going to be a tough game, but we're going to lose that game because they have Russ. We have Nick Mullins. Kyler Murray, Nick Mullins. I'm taking Kyler. So realistically, I think there's only one winnable game the rest of the way. Do they win it? I don't think so. I really don't think they beat Dallas. Nick Mullins isn't playing good. If they play CJ Beathard, he might elevate them. But Andy Dalton is a good enough quarterback to beat an undrafted quarterback or a backup quarterback. He's played good last week. So the expectations going forward is play your young dudes, play hard, try to win, because I'm not a tanker. I'd rather be 8-8 than have a losing record and be picking top 10. Because the way I see it is, if you're 8-8, I think the 49ers could be drafting around 6 teams the latest, because there's 8 teams. No, yeah, the 8 teams going into the playoffs. No, 7 teams going into the playoffs.
So the latest that they would draft is 18?
Yeah, so 18, you could jump up in the draft and get your guy. Don't worry about getting that quarterback. If you really have that special someone and you could trade up, there's a couple teams. If you beat Dallas, they're staying in the top 5. They're not moving from the bottom 6, 7. That's the latest. Latest Dallas will pick will be 7 at latest. So that's a team you could trade up with. Another team is the Los Angeles Chargers. You could trade up with teams. They already have their quarterback. They already have who they need calling plays. So for me, don't worry about losing. Yes, would I personally want to get a good quarterback in this draft and draft higher? Of course. I want a good quarterback. I want an elite quarterback. But don't lose. I'm not a loser. I hate losing more than I love winning, and that's a lot.
Powerful statement there. Yeah, I tweeted this out earlier today. What I believe the 49ers should do to close out the season is treat these last 3 games like you're a Major League Baseball team in the month of September and you have no playoff hopes. Rosters expand. Not that the NFL roster expands, but the MLB roster expands to 40. You have all your farm prospects come up and you play them. That's what the 49ers need to do. I want to see guys like Juwan Jennings, if he can get healthy, get onto the field. I want to see Juwan Jennings in a wide receiver 3 role over the course of the last 3 games if he's healthy. Try out Mike McGlinchey at guard. That may be problematic, but find out if he can hold up against the Cowboys defensive line, the Cardinals defensive line. The Seahawks don't really have a defensive line, but just see how he fares. McGlinchey has been really, really bad. Maybe you hold out hope for him. His ceiling is that he's a solid right tackle. It was just been a very discouraging junior year for Mike McGlinchey. And I'd like to see what the team has in Justin Skule. And I know you're a huge Justin Skule guy, me not so much. But something needs to be done to this 49ers offensive line from center over to right tackle. Those 3 positions are completely up in the air right now. I'd like to see Richard Sherman get a more extensive look at safety. We'll see what happens if he wants to come back for another cheap deal. But I've been liking seeing him back there. Mm-hmm. So those are just my thoughts that the best thing for this team to do moving forward for the final 3 games is experiment, mess around. You're not trying to lose, but you're trying to get a glimpse of what you have in these other players like Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, linebacker. If you don't need to play Fred Warner, even though he may be eager to play and wanting to play him. Let's see what you got in these other guys. Austin Walter, give him Tevin Coleman snaps. Give him Jerick McKinnon snaps. See what you got in Austin Walter. So that's where I'm at. You're not trying to lose, but you're trying to take a thorough look at every single player you have on your roster. And you've had the opportunity to do that because of all the injuries, but just give guys more of a chance where there's still some other talent around on both sides of the ball.
See, I agree. You play the talent that you have, like see what you have, but I don't agree with Mike McGlinchey. He's a stiff. He's a bigger guy who's stiff. Playing guard, we've seen with him. He played guard when a couple guards went down last year, or was it a Minnesota game? Was it week 2018?
That was week 1, 2018.
2018. So we've seen him at guard. He's a stiff. Don't play him at guard. Don't play if you're gonna play someone else. Bench him. Take him out. I don't want him at guard. I'm being honest. I don't want him at guard. He will not be any better at guard. And for me, I'm honestly just rolling with I believe he's gonna get better because his weight is going to get to a certain weight where he's going to find that weight. And what's going to end up happening is Joe Staley has been coaching a lot of these up-and-coming tackles going into the NFL. So why not call up your buddy Joe? Hey, Joe, I'm coming down to San Diego to work out with you for the offseason. I don't care about these knee injections that I'm getting. I'm not getting them. Figure out how to help me, buddy. I need you. And Joe's going to say, come on down. Come on down. And Joe's going to get him right. And if we don't, if you also got to look at Justin School at right guard. Justin School's a little bit more mobile. He's a little bit more less of a stiffer. So I would like to see Justin School possibly at guard. But I really don't want to see Justin School at guard because I think he could be your swing tackle. Yes, you don't see your swing tackles play extensive time. And I think he could be one of those guys who could stick around with the 49ers for a few years playing that swing tackle position.
Yeah, 2 years left on his contract, if I remember correctly. He was drafted last year, was a part of that very solid draft class. And now he had one bad performance against the Packers going against Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith. I wouldn't mind seeing him get a second crack at it, but he was very bad against the Packers. Give him a shot at redemption. See what he can do. So that's
what he was also but he was also very good against Myles Garrett and the Browns and a couple other big name guys that he played last year. So you got to have that chance to redeem yourself or something because
Absolutely.
I think he's capable of doing it at a starting level, not at an elite level. I think he's a starting caliber to tackle, but not at no elite level where you get rid of Trent Williams or anything like that.
No. He's priority numero uno. Trent Williams is. All right, we're an hour deep. An hour deep of the Faithful Fanatic. The 49ers lose to the Washington football team. They are 5-8. 5-8. We'll see what the remaining 3 games bring. Brandon Ayuk is the silver lining of this unforeseen season. Again, if anybody were to tell me the 49ers would be 5-8 going into week 15, I would not have believed them if they were to tell me this in August. Yet here we are. Brandon Ayuk, superstar. Javon Kinlaw improving. There's a lot to be hopeful for.
Do you think Brandon Ayuk breaks Jerry Rice's record, a rookie record with 927 yards into the next 3 games? He's at 660 right now.
It's certainly possible with the way that he's been fed the ball.
I think he breaks 1,000. He needs 340 for it over the next 3 games. I think he breaks 1,000. I think he really does. Dallas,
he very well could. He's got 3 very favorable matchups coming.
Yeah, and I think he could break. It. Dallas has no one who could cover him. Who's Seattle going to have cover him? Trey Flowers. They have Trey Flowers, Shaquille Griffin. Those dudes aren't going to cover him. Patrick Peterson. Please line up Patrick Peterson on him. He's going to give him the work. He really is. So I think he gets either close to 1,000, but I think he for sure breaks Jerry Rice's record.
Let's end with Marco's take on that Brandon Ayuk is going into the history books with the most receiving yards by a 49ers rookie wide receiver in franchise history, and that he'll eclipse the 1,000-yard mark. I love it. It's realistic considering their next 3 opponents, the Washington football team, the Cardinals, and the Seahawks. This concludes the Faithful